Well, good afternoon. My name is Nathan Stelter, president here at the Stelter Company. Thank you, as always, for joining us on what is a very special webinar today, Giving USA 2025 Unpacked. I'm absolutely thrilled to bring together our own client strategist and our very own Lynn Gaumer, who's the senior gift planning consultant here at the Stelter Company, who will be hosting this panel on Giving USA data that is specific to each nonprofit sector. Our strategists have dug into the data to uncover what's really happening across all these sectors and subsectors and what it means for your fundraising strategy. Very quick introductions as we have a lot to get to today. Of course, we have Lynn Gaumer, who will lead the panel today, and joining her are Casey Birch, our client strategist in our health sector, Janet Klobb, client strategist for education sector, Renee Dernan, senior client strategist covering human services, international affairs, and religion, Kit Lancaster, client strategist for arts and culture, environmental and animals, and public society benefit. And finally, Amber Moore, associate client strategist for human services, international affairs, and religion. And really quickly, we'll also look at what they're going to be covering today so we can get right to the good stuff. First, Lynn will lay a little groundwork with us and provide some context around some of these key findings. Next, each strategist will dive into their subsector, and you can see the order on your screen. And then the six will discuss what they see impacting giving today and the rest of 2025. Finally, we'll wrap everything up by taking some questions as always, and I know we had some questions already provided, so thank you very much. But before we do that, and before I hand it off, we want to really know who's with us today. So we're going to do a quick poll. I know Jen is pulling that up right now. You should see that on your screen. Please let us know what subsector does your nonprofit serve. We'll give you a little bit of time to fill that out.
Thanks, Nathan. If you guys see the poll on your screen and you're not seeing your subsector, try to scroll down. Sometimes the poll gets cut off and see if you can see it. We have about 82% of the participants have submitted their answers. We'll give you just a few more seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And here's your results.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. Well, we have a smattering, as we expected, a little bit of everything, education, healthcare kind of leading the way, human services, arts. Got a good representation from all over. So I'll hand it off to Lynn and we can kind of start digging into the good stuff.
Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate the introduction and thank you for joining us today. I am thrilled to be leading this webinar with all these great strategists. And what I really want you to keep in mind as we go through the data and the research is how you can bring this information back to your offices, back to your teams. How can you utilize it to create strategic planning, to discuss with your board members, to talk with your major gift officers, your annual gift officers. So really think about how you can use this for donor conversations and things like that as we move forward today. But I first wanted to lay the groundwork and look back at 2024. I know we're more than halfway into 2025 now, but these numbers were based on 2024, and we're going to see that they were very strong numbers. But why is that? Well, a lot of giving mirrors the economy and the stock market, and what we had in 2024 was a strong economy. The S&P 500 had a total return of about 25%. Inflation, although still a little high, did come down from its 2023 average of 4.1%. We had an increase in disposable income and wealth. GDP was solid. And then outside of the economy, we were seeing demographic shifts. Remember, 10,000 baby boomers are turning 65 every day, and that's great news for planned giving. And then there were current social cultural factors all coming into this. It was an election year, it was an Olympic year. The WNBA took off, so women's sports. So we had a lot of things going on in 2024. So that led to $592.5 billion in giving. And this is, again, what I want you to take back to your teams. That amounts to $1.62 billion every single day going to charity. So I wanted to first look at, who is giving? And really, individuals are the backbone of giving, with 66% of that. Foundations was also strong at 19%, bequests 8%, corporations 7%. And when you combine individual giving and bequest giving, that amounts to almost 3/4. It's 74%. So when we think about our planned giving programs, I want you to think about these particular numbers. Individuals giving at 66%, bequests at 8%. Foundations, interesting enough, is growing. This is the third year in a row that it crossed the $100 billion mark. So they have seen a significant increase. What else do we have? We have bequests. Bequests totaled 8%. Now that was a little bit down from 2023, which is okay. These numbers tend to fluctuate based on estates of high net worth donors and not the economy. So just keep that in mind. But remember, bequests are the staple of your planned giving program, right? So continue to promote these. Generally, bequests end up to be about 7 to 9% of the total pie of giving. And then we have corporate giving. Corporate giving had huge gains, really fueled by a strong economy. It was a 9.1 increase, and it reached an all-time high in inflation-adjusted numbers. So we have, even though it's the smallest part, it did play a significant role in philanthropy. But I think the numbers looking at 2024 are important, but I think what's even more important is when we look at the history. So here we have a timeline. So 1984, this is what giving looked like. And now we have 2024. And look at how it has changed. Look at foundations. Foundations grew from 7% to 19%. Why is that? Well, a growing number of wealthy individuals are creating and contributing to foundations. So we have that. It's also the stock market as well. According to Foundation Mark, U.S. foundation assets rose by about $170 billion in 2024, pushing assets to a record of $1.64 trillion. So that's something that we need to look at. But I also want to look at individuals. Individual giving, the number of individuals giving has decreased from 80% to 66%. And that obviously that share is shrinking. And we want to really take a deep dive into why is that. We do know from the research that that the mid to lower level donors are becoming fewer, and those in the high net worth are giving more. But why is that? Well, I don't think you can really put one reason on it. I think it's related to several. So I think, of course, economic pressures and inflation, we had, between those 1984 and 2004 numbers, we had, of course, a recession. And sometimes when that recession hits, once giving stops, sometimes donors don't return. So we had that. So again, a decline in small to mid-level donors. Fewer than half of U.S. households now give annually, and that's down steadily over the last 2 decades. And then we have tax policy changes. Of course, we just had new tax laws signed in July, and that higher standard deduction that was put in place back in 2018 really change the makeup of giving, because about 90% of individuals are taking the standard deduction and no longer taking an itemized deduction for charitable deductions. So that also plays a factor. What else? Well, wealth concentration, fewer middle class donors, and really, well, a handful of very wealthy donors account for a larger share of overall philanthropy. DAFs and foundation, there's definitely a growing share. DAFs have been growing significantly over the past decade. And you saw the rise in private foundations as well in that in those earlier numbers. And then there's been a decline, as we're going to see here in just a bit. There's been a decline in giving to religion, which we're going to hear from Amber about in a little bit, but also some trust. Only about 22% of donors highly trust charities. And you can do a couple things on that. There is a great Stelter blog on it, actually, on how you can really increase trust among your donors. And you can certainly look at that, and we can send you the link if you put it in the chat as well. So generosity by sector. So where did these charitable dollars go? Well, the good news is, look at all those up arrows, right? So you saw just about every sector increase. We had 3 in the double-digit category: education, public society benefit, and international affairs. Religion did increase, but when you add in inflation, it really came like relatively flat. So those are all good numbers. We all had increases in every single major subsector. But again, it's important to look at these numbers over time. So here's a snapshot from 1984, 40 years ago, to 2024. And again, look how it's changed. Education, 11 to 14%. Human services, 6 to 14%. So many of these sectors have really, really increased the percentage. We have public society benefit, 8% to 11%. But I want to focus in here on religion. Religion in 1984 was 62%, and now its share is down to 23%. And it's still the largest share of charitable dollars, but it has shrunk considerably. So what I want to do is really start here. And we're going to look at religion and philanthropy and these shifting trends. So again, religion has the highest share at 23%. It didn't quite, it was just right up there with inflation. So it really was pretty flat. But let's take a look and let's talk to Amber, who is our specialist in religion. And Amber, I'm going to ask you 2 questions here. What factors do you think are driving this downward shift? And how can faith-based organizations adapt to sustain donor support?
Those are really great questions, Lynn. Let's take a look at the data and see what that's telling us. So, as you mentioned, nominal giving to religion did rise. It rose to 1.9%. But after inflation, it actually fell 1%. This makes religion the only sector to grow in name, but not real value. But what really counts as religion? When we're talking about this data, I think it's really important to think about what Giving USA considers religion here. It includes giving to houses of worship like churches, mosques, and synagogues. It also includes religious media and communications, as well as interfaith coalitions. It does not include religious schools, hospitals, and charities categorized under other subsectors like education or health. With that in mind, although we have seen religion's percentage drop over the years, it still remains the largest giving sector. And if Giving USA included all religiously oriented charities, up to 75% of giving could be considered religious in nature. So not only is it the biggest, but also when you look at it as a whole, really if Giving USA included all those other religiously oriented charities, it would be even larger, up to 75%. So then, as we mentioned, religion is the largest recipient sector of 23% of the total pie, but that's down from 24% that it had last year and the 34% it held in 2011, not to mention the 62% that you mentioned and that you saw 40 years ago in 1984. So what could be causing the drop? According to a 2024 Pew Research study, 80% of Americans believe that religion is losing influence. In 2002, that number was only 52%. Also, according to a 2023 Gallup poll, membership in houses of worship has dropped from 70% in 1999 to 45% in 2023. Lower attendance means there's fewer opportunities to give in person, which can also contribute to a drop. And one important thing I want to mention here when talking about membership, although attendance is down for most Christian groups, it is up slightly among Muslim and Jewish Americans. So getting to your second question, Lynn, how can faith-based organizations adapt to sustain donor support? Here's some recommendations. Religious giving is heavily tied to older traditional donors. This decline in share suggests a need to engage younger, more diverse donors and utilize updating giving vehicles like DAFs, online giving, recurring gifts. And with lower attendance in person equating to fewer opportunities to give, online giving needs to be easy to use and easy to find. Secondly, values and visibility matter more than ever. We see that sectors that align closely with emerging social and environmental concerns are seeing faster growth. So religious organizations need to reconnect with donors on shared values, clearly show their impact, and tell stories that resonate beyond just tradition. Also, donor acquisition for many religious organizations is different than what you typically have with fundraising. List rentals are not the answer to falling membership numbers. So it's really important not to forget about evangelism and its importance. Then lastly, with legacy giving, make sure to diversify your legacy pipeline. Don't just focus on those who are wealthy. According to the Giving USA report, approximately $10.2 billion came from smaller estates of less than $1 million, which shows that there's great opportunity in donors with modest means, but deep loyalty.
Thank you, Amber. Now we're going to switch over and take a look at the sectors that have all-time highs. So let's take a look here. 4 of the 9 subsectors reached all-time highs in 2024. Education, health, arts and culture, humanities, and environment and animals. So we're going to take a deep dive into each of these, and we're going to start with education, followed by health, and then round it out with arts, culture, and humanities, and environmental and animals. And so I'm going to start with Jana, who is our education strategist. So Jana, what factors do you think contributed to these record levels, and what do you think organizations can do to sustain or continue this growth? Jana?
Thanks, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Within the umbrella of the education sector, we'll find higher education institutions, our colleges and universities, as well as independent schools and primary and secondary schools. The sector received 14% of total overall contributions to nonprofits, ranking it third overall. It's very promising to see in this year's report that giving to education was up 13.2% between 2023 and 2024. When that number was adjusted for inflation, it was about a 9.9% increase. And as Lynn mentioned, 2024, the sector reached an all-time high with an estimated 88.32 billion raised. That's a definite positive after the prior year, when after adjusted for inflation, education experienced a 5.5% decline. And as the slide indicates, when you take a step back and look at giving to education over the past 4 decades, this sector has received between 11 and 14% of total contributions. So what contributed to this great year? Let's take a look. For higher ed in particular, there was a 6% increase in 2024 as compared to the prior year, which is 3% when adjusted for inflation. Total contributions to higher ed reached $60.1 billion. That's incredible. Based on the Voluntary Support of Education survey conducted by the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, there was a higher level of giving from foundations, and also alumni stepped up to the plate, and their giving was up by 7.5%, which is also promising to see. It's important to note also that alumni gifts may actually be higher share than is represented here, because just over 42% of foundation support flows from alumni family foundations. And then in addition, DAF grants are often alumni funded, but not counted toward alumni totals. Also, mega gifts to higher education rebounded to pre-2023 levels. These gifts of $10 million plus gained in both the number of gifts and the total dollar amount. In 2024, we saw 186 gifts of $10 million or more, up from 156 the year prior. That's a 16% increase. And let's not overlook that there were reported 13 gifts of $100 million plus. And of note there, two of the largest gifts given to higher ed were directed to institutions that provide medical education and other public health related programs. To me, these donors are showcasing their confidence in key institutions to drive the health in our country, the future of health in our country and beyond. For independent schools, reporting from the National Association of Independent Schools Facts at a Glance report showed the median funds received had increased by 8.3%. But we see within the reporting a trend that is all too common, where fewer people are giving, but they are making larger gifts that help make up for the decline in the number of donors. The 2025 Philanthropy Pulse survey conducted by CCS Fundraising reflected that primary and secondary schools saw almost half of the surveyed schools with an increase to their annual fund giving, with the median raised at $1.5 million. Two other high points were record-breaking years for giving to our historically Black colleges and universities in 2024, and also the largest gift ever made to a community college here in the US was documented in March of 2024 in the amount of $116.2 million. So what are the recommendations moving forward and sustaining? Thinking back to what I recently mentioned about our mega donors, they can be attracted by big ideas. I have the privilege here at Stelter to work with a number of outstanding institutions, and I will say there's some incredibly inspiring initiatives and research being showcased. Higher ed is really stepping up to highlight the societal impact they can make and solidifying value, benefit, and relevance locally, nationally, and globally. It's exciting to hear about the bold, groundbreaking advancements taking place, and our mega donors can be attracted to invest in these ambitious, life-changing initiatives. Second, it's been a whirlwind in education, to say the least, with the increasing challenges on how to carefully navigate the current political, economic, and social issues. It's a critical time to stay in communication with donors and to share how your institution is being impacted. When it comes to cuts in funding, student aid, and research, it may inspire supporters to step up and fill the gaps these funding shortfalls will cause. Connect with your donors' passions and keep them in the loop here. And third, according to the 2024 Giving by Generation report from Giving USA, our boomers rank giving to education as second in their top sectors to support. Their loyalty is strong, so deepen those relationships, the silent generation too. The great wealth transfer has begun, so it's important to remain connected in a meaningful way and be sure to create awareness and opportunity with younger donors, where you can highlight the broad positive societal impact and value your institution is making through research and programs. Next, really just elevate that visibility around DAFs. They continue to be a popular choice for donors when supporting educational institutions. And here at Stelter, we see the receptiveness for giving through DAFs reflected through our donor survey results within the education sector. And lastly, retain and grow the increase in alumni giving means institutions now need to do a great job of thinking and stewarding those donors to keep them engaged and invested for the long term, hopefully increasing the opportunity to convert them into plan givers in the future. So that's my wrap, high-level wrap on education. I could talk for an hour here, but I know there's some exciting things to report in the healthcare vertical, so I'll pass the baton to Casey.
Thank you, Jana, and hello, everyone. So yes, as we shift to the health subsector, we're looking at organizational categories such as healthcare, mental health and crisis intervention, diseases, disorders, and medical disciplines, and medical research. Gifts to the health subsector grew 5% in 2024, or 2% adjusted for inflation, to an estimated total of $60.51 billion. And that makes up 10% of all donations received by charities in 2024. The subsector has experienced nearly 16% growth from 2022 to 2024, which has outpaced overall giving. So it's great to see this upward trajectory in giving to health organizations. And yet we know that many of you are operating still on the slimmest of margins. Philanthropy is essential to ensure both current operations and future innovation continue in the healthcare and medical research space. So what has been contributing to this growth? As we know, there's been so much need and urgency for health-related giving during and after the pandemic years, and the report highlights substantial support for the areas of mental health, cancer care, and maternal health. So in terms of mental health, the American Academy of Pediatrics and other prominent healthcare institutions have declared child and adolescent mental health a national emergency. Even with donor support and interventions, mental health treatment remains a challenge for people of all ages, with obvious gaps in care provided, and financial costs can be a roadblock to getting treatment. So I so appreciate that many of our clients, particularly children's hospitals, have been focusing their fundraising efforts to address these urgent needs. Additionally, cancer remains one of the leading causes of death in the United States, affecting 1 in 3 people in the country. The Stelter Company is based here in Iowa, which as a state actually has the second highest cancer rate in the nation, and it's continuing to rise. So personally and professionally, I'm grateful that donors are supporting education, research, and other solutions to mitigate the increase in cancer cases and reduce cancer's burden on society. The report also notes how maternal health, reproductive justice, gender equity, and women's well-being, both here and around the world, are becoming front burner causes for many donors. For example, Melinda French Gates is one of the mega donors in these important areas, with more than $1 billion committed over 2 years. So across these areas and more, there's definitely a range of performance and results in fundraising for the health subsector. The report indicates that academic medical centers and large health systems are seeing more success, and smaller nonprofits are facing more challenges. And I know many of our clients in healthcare are focused on transformational giving and how blended gifts can be a key part of their campaign efforts. We are seeing a drop in how many planned gifts are considered mega gifts, so that will be an interesting trend to watch moving forward. The report reminds us that those largest gifts often come with significant complexity, and so we can be mindful of not letting them crowd out those smaller gifts, which we know can also make a really big impact. So in terms of recommendations, the advice we see here for health shares some similarities with other subsectors as well: investing in technology, digital outreach, legacy societies, and multi-generational strategies. So as far as technology and digital efforts go, the current research studies use different methods and samples, and therefore results have been mixed. For example, M&R benchmarks found increases in one-time gifts and monthly gifts to health organizations online, while Blackbaud Institute saw online giving to healthcare and medical research organizations decline. And high rates of new donors, often from peer-to-peer fundraising and events, both online and offline, can also create retention challenges in this space. So here at Stelter, we know that for plan giving, a multi-channel marketing communication strategy that supports education, conversion, and stewardship is most effective, encompassing both your legacy giving prospects and your known plan gift donors. As we consider your pipeline for support, I do want to emphasize the generational considerations. We certainly know about the great wealth transfer, and like other subsectors, our health clients have a significant focus on boomers as top plan giving prospects. And while that is appropriate, we should also be mindful about engaging with younger generations as well. In Giving USA's 2024 special report on giving by generation, boomers do not list health in the top 3 charity sectors they support. Religion and education, as you just heard about, are at the top of their list, along with military and veterans organizations. But health is listed 3rd for Gen X and millennials, and 2nd for Gen Z. So for millennials and Gen Z, average giving to US health and medical orgs has increased by about 25% since 2021. So with this in mind, I think it's even more important to consider age and stage along the continuum of the legacy giving donor journey. We can find ways in our marketing to match messaging to mindset, so we're reaching younger folks in cost-effective ways, sharing helpful estate planning resources, connecting with their values and charitable goals, and planting seeds for future support that is so critical for the health subsector. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kit for a closer look at arts, culture, and humanities, as well as environment and animals.
Perfect. Thanks, Casey. And good afternoon, everyone. Turning to the arts and culture space, this includes organizations like visual and performing arts groups, museums, humanities organizations, historical societies, and even public media. So in 2024, giving to arts, culture, and humanities reached $25.1 billion. This is the highest dollar amount we've ever seen in this subsector, and it represents about 4% of total charitable giving. Contributions grew nearly 10% from 2023, or 6.4% when adjusted for inflation. Over the longer term, arts culture consistently represents about 4 to 5% of total giving when we look at giving across 5-year segments, but is also one of the subsectors that's most closely tied to economic shifts. So when we see the economy go up, giving often grows, and when the economy slows, so does support for arts and culture. Despite the growth in total giving in 2024, we are seeing a little bit of softness online. According to the M&R Benchmarks 2025 report, online revenue for cultural organizations declined about 4% last year, and public media organizations saw essentially flat growth in the online space. In 2024, Giving USA shares that one of the biggest stories in arts philanthropy was the outsized role of very large gifts. 7- and 8-figure contributions drove a pretty sharp increase in capital support, especially providing funding for endowments, campaigns, and infrastructure projects. Looking just at gifts of $1 million or more to arts organizations, the total jumped to nearly $396 million, up about 150% from the year before. That increase came even as the number of gifts dropped by nearly half, so fewer donors, but much larger checks. And that same pattern showed up in museums and libraries. They received $489 million in significant gifts in 2024, up about 50% from 2023. Again, they had about half as many significant donors, but significantly larger gifts. And of course, bequests are often components of some of these larger gifts. Over the longer term, results have varied. Museums have generally held steady or even grown in both donor numbers and giving since 2019, according to the American Alliance of Museums. But performing arts organizations tell a different story. There's a report from TRG Arts that shared that orchestras, opera, dance, and theater groups are still facing declines in attendance. And fundraising revenue is also down by about 14% for orchestras, 7% for opera and dance, and 19% for theater. The one exception here is performing arts centers, which have actually seen gift revenue climb by nearly 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So the big picture, fewer donors are making gifts, but those who do are giving more, and museums continue to hold strong while much of the performing arts sector continues to face some real headwinds. As we look at what these trends might mean for your organization, the message here is clear. Relationships matter more than ever. With giving concentrated among fewer donors, retaining and engaging your current supporters is critical. That means personalized outreach and showing the real tangible impact that every gift can make. At the same time, as Casey mentioned in the health subsector, it's important to invest in the tools and the people who will make fundraising possible. Strengthening staff and systems will be key to navigate challenges with growth and retention. And finally, think about cultivating tomorrow's major gift donors. One effective path for that is through programs like monthly giving, which grew 16% in 2024 for cultural organizations. Combining retention, smart investment, and long-term cultivation can help arts organizations adapt to these shifts and secure more sustained growth for the future. Then shifting gears, let's look at the environment and animal space. This includes organizations focused on preserving and protecting the environment and natural resources, as well as those working in animal protection, humane societies, wildlife conservation, veterinary services, and zoos and aquariums. In 2024, giving to these subsectors totaled $21.6 billion, or 3% of total charitable giving. This is, again, the highest recorded amount for this space. Contributions increased nearly 7% from 2023, or about 4.5% when adjusted for inflation. Over the long term, giving to this subsector has been fairly steady, historically around 2% of total giving through 2004, before gradually increasing to about 3% of the total share today. Giving USA reports that several key themes drove giving in 2024. First, we saw large-scale collaborations between government and philanthropy that played a major role. The Environment Protection Agency awarded $27 billion through programs like the National Clean Investment Fund, with foundation and pooled funds helping broaden the reach of these funds to benefit local organizations. Executive orders now in 2025 have affected nonprofits' abilities to access these funds. But in 2024, this was a significant theme. And we also saw a significant rise in regranters and funding intermediaries, helping to channel these resources to grassroots climate and conservation efforts. Strategic philanthropy from major donors also had a big impact. High-profile gifts from Mackenzie Scott, Lorraine Powell Jobs, and others are supporting environmental justice, climate change initiatives, and large-scale conservation projects. Philanthropy continues to focus on specific environmental and animal causes. Significant grants last year helped support wildlife conservation, land returns to Indigenous communities, zoo expansions, and animal welfare programs. Philanthropy also helped to fund storytelling and public awareness campaigns to raise visibility for some of these issues. Finally, monthly and online giving continues to play an important role in this space. Both environmental and animal welfare organizations saw digital growth that outpaced the overall average, with giving especially concentrated in the last quarter of the year. According to M&R's Benchmarks 2025 report, online revenue for environmental organizations grew about 5% in 2024, while wildlife and animal welfare groups grew 8%. Monthly online giving in this space is also growing, increased 11% in 2024, and now accounts for 43% of total online revenue. Notably, new donors contributed more than 20% of total online revenue for both environmental and animal welfare organizations, showing the continued importance of digital channels for attracting new donors. As we close out the environment and animal section, the report highlights several strategies for nonprofits to strengthen donor engagement and fundraising outcomes. First, stay in tune with donor interests. Don't assume intentions remain static, even for your longtime supporters. External events, things like national disasters or news coverage, can shift donor priorities, and checking in during these moments can reveal new opportunities for support. Second, seek partnerships and alliances. If your organization can't fully address an emerging need, collaborate with similar mission-aligned organizations. Donors respond positively to visible partnerships and collaborations that expand your impact and show a united effort, particularly when there's a community need. Third, engage local communities in solution design, including Indigenous groups. Ensuring that all voices are heard and incorporated strengthens donor confidence and aligns your organization with best practices for inclusive, sustainable outcomes. And finally, continue to cultivate high net worth donors and encourage planned gifts from all donors, while promoting gifts through donor advised funds, non-cash contributions, and tax smart giving strategies. Combining these approaches can deepen engagement and help you build that long-term sustainability.
Thank you, Kit and Casey and Jenna, for all those insights. I really appreciate that. Now we're going to look at those sectors who year after year have seen increases. So let's take a look at those. So human services, public society benefit, and international affairs all see increases year after year. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with Renee in our international and human services sectors. And I'm going to ask Renee, start with Renee and finish with Kit. But Renee, what do you think is driving these gains? And what do you think organizations can do to sustain this growth? Renee?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lynn. Yes, so I'm going to cover our two human services and international affairs subsectors here today. And we're going to start out with the human services. So let's look at this very strong fundraising performance we've seen from this subsector. It actually includes nonprofits that provide essential needs and services like food, shelter, and employment to support people here in the U.S. So in 2024, giving to this subsector increased 5% from 2023, representing 14% of all charitable giving, with a total of over $91 billion raised. So remarkably, this 2024 numbers marked the third year for human services of overtaking higher education to claim the #2 spot in total charitable dollars. Actually, it's bumping it back up close to the COVID-19 pandemic levels that you see there on the chart. The contributing themes for this then. So, sadly, the reasons that drive a lot of the higher fundraising in both actually our human services and international affairs is things like natural disasters and the response to those. So natural disasters have dramatically increased over just the last decade. The US tracks billion-dollar weather and climate events each year, and over the last 40 years, the US averaged 9 per year, while if you look at the average for the last 5 years, it has skyrocketed to 23. The other causes that human services cover is homelessness and food insecurity. And again, vulnerable people in America, this has been steadily increasing. So for homelessness, we've steadily seen an increase since 2017, reaching a record high here in 2024. And food insecurity is still up since the pandemic, reversing that decade-long downward pattern we had been seeing prior to this. How did these numbers then get here? As many of us have been talking about in our subsectors, we're seeing this emergence of mega donors. So actually, these are people that are giving close to $250 million range in their funding. And the three big ones in the human services space in 2024 were Mackenzie Scott. She continued to give, contributing $325 million to 20 human services nonprofits. We also had Paycheck founder Thomas Golisano announced a $360 million to upstate New York nonprofits. And the Bezos Day One Fund awarded $111 million to 40 organizations working to help resolve homelessness in 2024. So we've gone beyond the major donors to the mega donors in what we're seeing here that is making the increase. As far as though broad-based fundraising, year-end continues to be the season of giving for nonprofits in the human services subsector, with extensive Giving Tuesday campaigns performing particularly well for them. However, also looking at the M&R benchmark report that we've been talking about here, they share that they have actually seen digital engagement plateau for this sector as well. Moving in then to the international affairs context, this includes organizations engaged in international aid, development, and disaster relief working on peace, security, and human rights issues. In 2024, giving to this subsector increased 17.7% from 2023, representing 6% of all charitable giving, with a total of over $35 billion raised. In international affairs, it is in its 9th year at the 7th spot when it overtook arts and cultural back in 2016, primarily driven by the refugee crisis awareness in the US. And as you can see by looking at this chart over the long term, giving to this subsector is historically very volatile due to emergencies, disasters, and a humanitarian crisis, with top giving during the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. You see that as the latest spike there. The contributing factors for this, again, sadly, reasons are humanitarian crisis and conflict continue to be on the rise. With the Gaza and Ukraine conflicts and situations such as this has escalated the needs back up in 2024, although not to the historic pandemic levels we saw prior. How? So kind of the opposite in our international affairs space, the list of $1 million givers to international organizations was actually shorter in 2024 than it was in 2023. But what kind of shifted and helped was that the monthly giving. We've had a couple of our strategists speak about the monthly giving and how that is growing, as well as the DAF grants have grown. The other aspect is we are seeing women are powering women's well-being. So Mackenzie Scott, her giving extends well beyond the US, where she awarded 199 new unrestricted grants in 2024. And in May of 2024, Melinda French Gates announced a $1 billion commitment to improve women's well-being and health, where the funding will all be distributed over the next 2 years. In M&R's benchmark study for international affairs, they actually reported a decline in online giving with that high level of saturation in the digital channel and the growing domestic needs often outpacing Americans' international outlook. So our recommendations for both of these subsectors is kind of similar because they are both very crisis driven. I do want to say all the recommendations that my prior strategists have given are all very solid in any of our subsectors. But for our human services and international affairs, where we're seeing this great gap between demands and reduced resources, really focusing on urgency and relevance is important in our messaging to our donors. At this point, it's a great time to ask the donors what matters to them. So things like surveys, one-on-one conversations and interviews can identify values that they align with and connect and create empathy. Also focus on regular giving, even at modest levels. Retention is very much key in this space, especially with urgent donors. We know it is really hard to keep those and retain those emergency donors. And so really even focusing on modest levels is very important. And also consider stewarding your mid-level donors like they're VIPs. This mighty middle can feed so many aspects of things, including the legacy giving pipeline that we're focused on. Lastly, consider reducing your focus on email given the saturation in that channel, and consider what the Giving USA 2025 generational study shared with us, that actually 88% of donors are prompted by direct mail to give either offline or online, with, believe it or not, the millennials are the most likely generation to respond to that direct mail. Other considerations is that millennials and Gen Z are the most likely to get to social media, but boomers are increasing and becoming more open to the social media as well. Lastly, the younger generation, they're going to be more likely to respond to things such as text. So consider expanding into different channels as well on that end. And so that's my coverage of the international affairs and human services, and I'll hand it off to Kit for her to share about public society benefit.
Perfect. Thanks, Renee. So public society benefit is our final subsector to spotlight today. This broad category includes gifts to civil rights and voter education organizations, community improvement and capacity building organizations, philanthropy and grant-making foundations, science and social science organizations, professional associations, and military and veterans organizations. In 2024, giving to these organizations totaled $66.8 billion, or 11% of our total charitable giving. Contributions increased by nearly 20% from 2023, or 16% when we adjust for inflation, making this the second highest inflation-adjusted value on record for this space. This subsector has shown consistent growth over time. Looking at 5-year periods, public and societal benefit organizations represented roughly 7% of total giving through about 2014. Then they moved to 8% from 2015 to 2019 and 10% from 2020 to 2024. The surge in donor support in this space in 2024 was fueled by a few things. Really, we saw a lot of heightened responses to urgent societal and global issues, many of which also drove some of the increases Renee was just mentioning in the human services and international affairs space. So these are things like the humanitarian crises in Gaza and Ukraine, disaster relief after hurricanes Helene and Milton, justice-related causes like racial equity, LGBTQ rights, and women's reproductive health. Funding also supported initiatives combating anti-Semitism and democracy protection and voter participation during this election year. We saw large strategic gifts playing a critical role. High net worth donors like Mike and Jackie Bezos and Mackenzie Scott helped organizations respond flexibly and rapidly, and unrestricted gifts allowed nonprofits to deploy resources where they were most needed. DAFs continue to be a significant funding channel for this subsector. The way Giving USA counts contributions to donor advised funds is that when they're given to national organizations as the sponsors, so things like Fidelity Charitable or Vanguard Charitable, those are counted as public society benefit giving. And then Giving USA subtracts out the estimated value of grants from these national funds. So this approach helps us to avoid double counting, and it also means that growth in donor advised funds often highly correlates with growth in the public society benefit subsector. Public society benefit organizations are also frequent recipients of grants from DAFs, receiving about 17% of the total share of grants from donor advised funds across the board, and then about a quarter of DAF grants coming from community foundations in 2023. Finally, strong digital engagement and real-time communication were key drivers of growth in 2024. M&R benchmarks reported that rights-based and advocacy organizations in particular experienced a surge of support following the presidential election, as 47% of the annual online revenue raised by participating rights organizations came in between November 1st and the end of the year. So that's nearly half of their annual online revenue that came in the last 2 months of 2024. The growth in giving in this subsector reflects donors' passions for addressing urgent societal and global challenges. To maintain and deepen these relationships, fundraisers should connect to that passion and be transparent about organizational needs, actively inviting donors into conversations about future plans. Consistent, genuine outreach is key here. Pay attention to current events, understand the variety of issues that resonate with your donors, and recognize that giving often reflects intersectional interests. At the same time, fundraisers should cultivate high net worth and mid-level donors, encourage planned gifts, and promote donor advised fund contributions to secure long-term flexible support. And finally, investing in fundraising technology and data-driven strategies can enhance outreach, improve donor tracking, and support timely, personalized engagement. And Lynn, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kit. I appreciate everyone's insights on that. And remember, we looked at 2024 numbers, and we also looked at numbers going back to 1984 and over 4 decades of numbers. So again, use all this information and insight and research to really promote plan giving and really inform your teams about charitable giving. But now I want to look ahead. So what's ahead for 2025 and even beyond that? So we're going to have a quick poll, and I'm curious to know what you're thinking here. What one factor do you see most influencing giving this year that may impact what we see in the Giving USA 2026 report? So Jenna's going to pull up the answers for that so that you can.
Yeah, Lynn, just 1 minute and I will launch that poll here for you. Just having a little technical difficulty on it. I apologize. The last poll that we did is not going away, so I'm going to share that with you again. Remind you of who's here. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop that one, and maybe that will allow me to go to the next poll.
I think that there's a lot of factors that could be contributing, contributing and influencing giving this year. But we'll see if we can get this poll up, because I would be curious. And then after that, we will hear from our strategists.
There we go. It should be up now.
It should, yes. So I'm seeing it. So new tax laws, the economy, tariffs, executive orders, federal funding freeze and cuts, political polarization, declining public trust, rage giving, and or maybe there's another one that you're thinking of, which I would love to hear too. And then I'll talk, and then I'll hear from each of our strategists as we wrap up today of what their thoughts are on 2025 and beyond.
We have about 60% who've answered, so I'm going to let them keep going for a few more seconds. Get your answer in. Think about what you think is impacting giving already this year and for the rest of this year. And then our strategist, as Lynn said, will let you know their thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And here's the results.
Okay, new tax laws, 18%, the economy, 29%, federal funding freeze cuts, 30%. So that's the highest. Political polarization, 6%, and declining public trust, 8%. So thank you for that. So I'm going to take that 18% of those of you who thought taxes would be influencing. So I'm going to start there before I turn it on over to our strategists here. So as you know, we've had new tax law signed in July of this year. And how is that going to influence charitable giving in 2025 and beyond? So that higher standard deduction is going to remain in place. And in fact, it has even a little bit, they gave us a little bonus even for this year. So it's even a little bit higher. But how does that impact giving? Well, as I mentioned earlier, 90% of individuals now take that standard deduction. They no longer itemize. And so if individuals, wanted to really have, taxes as part of their strategy for giving, they no longer itemize and they no longer get that tax benefit. But one thing that the tax law did give us is that universal charitable deduction has returned. And for those of you who were in the philanthropy sector in 2020 and 2021, you saw this. It was limited to just $300 and $600, but it raised about $30 billion in giving over those 2 years. Now they have more than tripled that amount. So individuals can give up to $1,000 or $2,000 for married couple for their charitable giving. Now, it's not a lot. I get that. I wish it was a lot more. We hoped for quite a bit more in our advocacy on the Hill, but we didn't get it, but we did get this. And we heard from the strategists today that those lower to mid-level donors were decreasing and higher net worth individuals were giving more. We heard that in just about every sector. Well, what happens if this brings back the lower to mid-level donor? It's up to you to then steward these donors, and maybe they'll end up combining it with a planned gift, like the $1,000 in annual giving for an individual, and then combine it with bequest giving or a beneficiary designation. I think here is your chance to begin stewarding newer donors I think that you're going to see newer and more donors come onto the scene, and then it's your job to really steward them going forward. So I'm optimistic about this provision. Now, we also heard from our strategists that, those high net worth individuals are giving, but the new tax law beginning in 2026 puts a floor on those itemizers. So they can only deduct charitable gifts exceeding 0.5% of their adjusted gross income. And for those high earners, those in the 37% tax bracket, they won't be able to deduct 37 cents on the dollar. They'll only be able to deduct 35 cents on the dollar. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but it does add up. And I do think it's going to influence giving going forward. I think it will influence giving in 2025 because for those who are mindful of these new tax laws coming into effect in 2026, I think we're going to see quite a bit of giving from now until the year end. These individuals will take advantage of the current tax laws before these go into effect. And then beyond that, in 2026 and beyond, I can see individuals bunching their gifts to get over that itemized deduction. And so I think we're going to see more of that. And I think we're going to see more individuals bunching their gifts into donor advised funds. And so I think the popularity of donor advised funds will also be increasing. And what I mean by bunching is several years worth of gifts made in 1 year. So for example, if an individual has been giving $8,000 a year, they may give $25,000 this year and then not give anything in years 2 or 3, or give to a donor advised fund $25,000 and then continue their normal cadence of giving, because that's what you can do with the donor advised fund. There's also a new corporate giving threshold. We saw that corporations were the smallest slice of the pie at the beginning of this conversation today, but they're going to have to contribute at least 1% of their taxable income for charitable contributions to qualify for any deduction. The Lilly School of Philanthropy feels that this is going to decrease giving among corporations. We'll just have to kind of see what Giving USA in the future is going to say about that. Do they give more to get over that threshold? Are they going to be bunching gifts? Are they going to be using DAFs? My guess is yes. So really connect with your corporate partners if you do get corporate gifts, and see how they are going to be dealing with this new tax law beginning in 2026. So that's my 2 cents on the tax law and in 2025 and beyond. But I want to hear from the strategists. So what factors do you see influencing giving today that may impact what we see in the Giving USA 2026 report? So I'm going to go all the way back to Amber, who we heard from about the religion sector. So Amber, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Lynn. I do believe that we're going to see religion's share of overall giving to continue to shrink because of the declining membership and more people identifying as spiritual but not religious. But I do believe it's going to likely remain the largest category in 2026. Online giving continues to grow within congregations. It was 1/3 of congregations utilizing it in 2015. And then in 2023, that grew to 2/3 of congregations. And we do see that those congregations who emphasize it do see stronger per capita giving, even though growth still hasn't kept up with inflation. So an increase in additional adoption of online giving could contribute to additional dollars. So we'll see where that goes. And then also, again, don't forget, as I mentioned earlier, up to 75% of giving can be contributed to religious affiliated nonprofits. And this seems to show how religious giving could be shifting from going straight to the churches instead of it being now dispersing to religious nonprofits who are delivering aid, education, health, and services.
Thanks, Amber. I'm going to switch it over to Jana, who's our education strategist. Jana, what factors do you see influencing giving today that may impact what we see in the Giving USA 2026 report for education?
Yeah, it's the crystal ball. There's definitely some headwinds, and the poll obviously revealed some things. But for education, a couple of things that come to mind quickly. Our executive orders and the ripple impact they have with the freezes and the cuts for sure. It's hard to keep up. I try to be on weekly blogs and webinars about it. I just really, the overarching economic and social environment will continue to influence what's happening in donors' ability and motivation to give. Motivation is a big one. However, it can, again, as mentioned earlier, offer an opportunity for donors to come forward, step up, take a stand to really invest and make a statement in what matters to them. And perhaps, as you mentioned, Lynn, we'll see even more grants from DAFs. Those come in strong for the education sector, and maybe some of the updates will motivate people to give through their DAFs more, or donors utilizing QCD gifts to make that immediate impact to support their beloved institutions and the key initiatives and programs that they're setting forth with. And then lastly, really just, again, thinking about some of the mega donors coming to the rescue, perhaps for some of the research initiatives or critical funding areas that they are passionate about. But you wrap all of this up, and that all being said, these efforts and raising money from these individuals across the board take the dedicated team of development professionals. Institutions are really needing to hold tight and advocate to keep their staff in place, to keep donor numbers growing and relationships strong to benefit their institutions both now and in the future as well. So those are things that kind of come immediately to mind in education. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Jana. I appreciate that. Casey, from the health sector, same question to you.
Yes, and I'll echo some of what Jana mentioned as well. Yeah, we certainly know in health, a lot has been happening, a lot is at stake. We have been experiencing this turmoil of executive orders and the federal funding freezes and cuts, related to research and Medicaid in particular. That's still, happening and still to come. Also attacks on policies and care that are deemed to be related to diversity, equity, inclusion. Political polarization is also resulting in declining trust in healthcare institutions. So that's a lot. And there is definitely urgency and opportunity for individual donors and philanthropy to step up and fill that gap. So we do hope we see that. I know there's also the risk of development departments and fundraising budgets being cut, which could help preserve margins and service lines in the short term, but can also stall revenue generation long term. I know AHP and others in the industry have been talking about that. So I echo what they say, that right now and moving forward, it's so important to tell your story and really make a strong case for support, both internally and externally. And here at Stelter, as your partners, we're here to help you do that too. So I'm hopeful that giving to the health subsector will continue to trend upward, and that we're striking that right balance between dollars in the door today that are making a current impact and the legacy gifts of tomorrow that will lay a really solid foundation for future support. So we'll see.
Thank you, Casey. And now turning to Renee for her insights for international affairs and human services. Renee, same question.
Thanks, Lynn. And yes, I'm actually very much with the 30% who said the federal funding cuts, as I think we all are, especially looking at international affairs. So actually, I was a little bit surprised when we were going in depth into the Giving USA 2025 report that they didn't really talk much about in the international affairs. It was early here in 2025 that we have been experiencing it's kind of like the tip of the spear of these USAID federal funding cuts. So working with so many of my clients right now going through really difficult situations where they're already making and having to cut the back on their staffing and their programs here in 2025. So how much our individual support can help offset this loss of federal funding is still TBD for 2026 or for the 2025 report. But I do anticipate fundraising to continue to rise, unfortunately, given the dire needs and this federal funding cuts that are happening. And human services is next on the plate. I do think that they will continue. The fundraising is going to continue to grow in the human services sector as well. Unfortunately, again, due to are increased natural disasters and homelessness and food insecurity. Actually, just last week, the federal SNAP cuts went into effect from the current administration's tax law, and they estimate that more than 2.4 million Americans will be losing their benefits going into 2026. So the needs are certainly rising. So it really talks about needing to focus on urgency and relevancy for both these subsectors in our messaging, and actually think about legacy giving, because it is a way that donors can give today, even if there is economic uncertainty. And you can make the message about how it can be a way to actually help others carry through for future crises when we get there to them as well.
Thank you, Renee. And finally, we're going to hear from Kit. Kit's going to cover several sectors. She's going to cover environment and animal, public society benefit, and arts and culture. So Kit, same question to you.
Yeah, overall, starting with environment and animal welfare, I'm hopeful for another year of growth here. There's a lot of momentum for animal welfare causes. And as Renee touched on, we've also had a lot of visibility of climate issues tied to those natural disasters. You think back to January of this year, the LA wildfires, the catastrophic floods that we saw in Texas, the intense heat waves this summer. There's just a lot of visibility of how the climate is affecting us. So when we look back, I think we'll probably notice some spikes tied to some of those specific disasters, while long-term climate projects are likely to see maybe flatter growth in comparison. Certainly, executive actions are going to be influencing us here, particularly for the environmental organizations. As mentioned, EPA funding is at risk this year as the courts continue to change direction on funding freezes, including a key appeals court ruling this week that allows the EPA to proceed with terminating billions of dollars in grants. Looking at public society benefit next, this sector had one of our biggest jumps in 2024, and I expect we're going to see strong performance again here in 2025. Lynn, you touched on kind of how the new tax law changes may affect corporate giving. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see corporate partnerships be strong here and grants be strong. And I think we're also likely to see donor concentration to keep increasing. So we'll continue to see, fewer donors, larger checks. I expect, even more moving through DAFs. And then finally, arts and culture, assuming the economy holds steady or grows, I think we're likely to see 2025 giving stay at or just above what we saw as our record 2024 level. Public media, I'm hopeful could be a standout this year. We have increased demand for fact-based, trusted information. That need just keeps growing. We may also see individual donors and foundations stepping in to fill more of the gaps left by federal funding cuts. We just saw an example of that recently in August with a coalition of grant makers called the Public Media Bridge Fund that's come together to help stabilize some of these at-risk media stations. And finally, keep an eye on recurring and monthly gifts continuing to grow. I expect that the major donors, foundations are still going to be driving the bulk of dollars. And we also may see a jump in large year-end gifts as donors respond to some of those upcoming tax law changes that Lynn mentioned, trying to get ahead of those. But that's what I see in my crystal ball for those three sectors.
Thanks, everyone. So now we're going to see if there are any questions that came in that either myself, Nathan, Jen, or any of our strategists could answer. So Jen, I'm going to turn it back to you to see if there are any questions that have come in during this presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. I do encourage the attendees to go ahead and put your questions in. We've had a couple come in. I wanted to let you guys know, I'm not sure how attendees see the questions, but if you submitted a question and it disappeared on you, look in the answered, under the answered tab. We have our strategists throughout the webinar have been typing in the answers. So also for the rest of you who gave them a thumbs up on those questions, that liked those questions, you should be able to find those answers in the Q&A section somewhere. So question that we have right now is, Lynn, you were talking about the tax changes, the tax law changes, and there's a question on when do those start? Do they all start in 2026, or did some of them already start in 2025?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a lawyer answer, say it depends. I would say most of them start in 2026. So for example, the yes, thank you very much. Like the universal deduction, deduction floor for itemizers, cap for high earnings, high earners, new corporate giving threshold, all beginning in 2026. But that higher standard deduction that we've had the higher standard deduction remain since 2028, and they even increased it this year. So for 2025, that higher deduction is even higher for this year. So, but for the most part, it's 2026. Yes, but that doesn't mean that individuals aren't planning in 2025. So for, like I mentioned before, those higher net worth, higher earners, they're looking at this and talking with their financial advisors and saying, okay, tax laws are changing in 2026. What do I need to do in 2025?
Right, right. That's a great point, Lynn. Next, Casey, and also I think this could apply to some of the other subsectors as well, but we have someone asking that given some of the federal and state funding cuts don't start until next year in 2026, but they're going to be phased in even later, and they could be changed by future government action. How much effort should the nonprofits be put into promoting raising funds to offset the cuts now when they may not actually come to fruition?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a good point. For me, I feel like it's about the uncertainty and the volatility, and that, to be honest, we know in this business, like philanthropy was already bridging gaps, that federal funding and, sort of public sector can't always serve and doesn't always serve. And so, and in healthcare in particular, philanthropy is so essential for innovation and for making sure those breakthroughs are happening and people are receiving the care that they need. So I think it's about the uncertainty, and that even if things happen later and they might change, it might go back and forth, it's just less reliable. And so I think there's a message there that, it's donors, it's community, it's people helping people, and stepping up to, to give and make a real difference. When we can't always rely on that support that, maybe we previously had, and is maybe uncertain in the future.
Certainly. Does any other strategists want to weigh in on that?
I just want to jump in and say, actually, this is the perfect time to be talking about legacy giving, because really, with the uncertainty of things, this can be a future gift for them, and to have the message about how it helps you prepare for when things like this really do happen.
Great, thank you. We have one question that would like you to all think a little bit about mid-level giving and how these nonprofits might see the $1,000 to $10,000 donors, how they might be giving this year.
I'll jump in on and just start with this. Really, I think we found, as we talked about the numbers, the overall giving dollars are growing, but the number of donors has been declining actually for many years now. And this middle sector of the $1,000 to $10,000 donors is proving to be pretty mighty in a lot of our subsectors, but it doesn't happen without investment. So really, projecting what the middle donors are going to be doing is kind of hard, because honestly, it takes stewarding, cultivating, growing. It takes an investment in that. But I do think I see so many of our nonprofit clients doing this and investing in this group. And it feeds not only your major audience, giving audience, it also feeds your legacy giving audience. So this really is a core element and a core constituency that we all should be really focusing on and paying attention to.
I'll also jump in on there. So, beginning in 2026, that universal charitable deduction return. So that's, you know, the $1,000, $2,000. And what I would recommend is making sure that you're promoting that right at the beginning of the year, because it's the shiny new penny, right? It's something new. It's like, oh, I get to now deduct up to $1,000 or $2,000 depending on their marital status. And because other organizations are going to be doing it too, right? So if individuals want to give at the beginning, but also make sure that you're promoted, you know, throughout the year, but also for sure at the end, because they may have forgotten about it, and Giving Tuesday and the holidays and things like that, they may think, oh, well, I haven't used that yet. Let me go ahead and make my $1,000 gift or $2,000 gift. And then again, I'm hopeful that those level donors will turn into either blended gift donors or mega donors, or, you know, or something in between. So
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. We had a question that came in before the webinar that I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on possibly. Do you have any thoughts on strategies that would incorporate using AI in the plan giving marketing the nonprofits are doing?
I guess I'll jump in with the AI question. You know, it's actually a little bit of a double sword here. You know, we got to walk a fine line. Fundraising is all about personal relationships, especially mid-level, major, legacy giving. And so we want to make sure that we are, you know, connecting with people as real people to people. However, you know, using AI to like prompt those ideas or thoughts can be very beneficial, and can help you go from like a blank page on what you might want to say to a donor. And it's a lot easier to like modify through those prompts. Just always ensure whatever you're putting into any AI software that it is not confidential information. But, you know, putting general prompts about, you know, wanting to talk to X type of donor that cares about this, and here's our programs, maybe can get you a starting point. But really, those you just use it to enhance and help you along in your personal connections and relationships. And I think that's how we're considering using it here at Stelter, even with the tools that we're providing our clients, is just as a prompt to help synthesize some information. But definitely, it's the one-on-one connection that is the most important.
yeah, and I'm going to add to that too. So I love what Stelter has redefined AI instead of artificial intelligence. It's your artificial intern, right? So so use it as that, especially if you're looking into maybe some more technical things. AI can definitely be wrong. The way it maybe describes a gift type or the tax benefits. It does a nice job, I will say that, but always look at it and make sure that you're doing your own research as far as, you know, you can maybe you get it as a start, but make sure that you're doing your own research as to, you know, how that gift type works or the tax benefits or things like that. I think AI is here to stay. I don't think it's going away. So you can certainly, you know, embrace it and use it, but I use it a lot for creativity. You know, if I can't think of a nice headline for an article or a subtitle or something like that for a webinar, it's nice to have. It's definitely helps with my workflow. So, but on the technical side and tax laws, and again, just be careful. And because I've seen it be incorrect. I'll ask it on purpose, and I'll be like, "What? No, that's not right." So, so anyway, just be careful when you use AI.
Yeah,
I'll just really quickly just wanted to kind of mention, I think, a great points. And again, AI continues to come up in every conversation it feels like we're having these days is, you know, again, I think one of the points that was made around donor trust. We need to be really mindful. There's been a lot of different panels or polls done around the AI and whether donors trust charities to use it responsibly. So I think to your point, Lynn, AI is here. It's going to be here in a variety of different ways. But we need to be really smart on how we utilize it and incorporate it in our programs, because once you lose trust with a donor, it's so hard to get it back.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to that I've used AI and had it provide me some statistics, and I've asked it to tell me, where did you get that statistic from? Can you give me the source? And then it comes back and says, well, it's just kind of, I took a bunch of things and put them together. So like Lynn said, double check everything that you're putting in there. And then we do have someone who just said in the notes here that Blackbaud just had an AI webinar earlier today. So if anyone wants the slides, this person has offered their email address. If you look in the questions, you'll see it. It's blackwelljay@wbu.edu if you're interested in that. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Say thank you to everyone who has been here, and we'll just go through. If you do come up with some other questions that you have, you can reach out to anyone that was on the panel here today. You see their names and their email addresses on the screen. They've all offered their email address to you, so feel free to reach out to them personally if you'd like to get to know more about Stelter, our services, our products. If you'd like to work with one of these strategists, check us out at stelter.com. Email us and I will get you in touch with them. And then finally, we have included references for the sources that were cited today at the end of the deck. So when you get the handouts, you will be able to find what those sources were, because they are real sources. So next week, you'll see an email from me, hopefully on Monday, with a link to the recording today and to the slides. And then thanks everyone for attending. We had, I think, close to 200 people here on the call with us today. I know it's been a long call. Thanks for hanging in there with us, everyone. And thank you to all of the strategists and to Lynn for putting the time and energy into really understanding how giving is being shaped by all the different factors that are going on last year and into the future. So thanks so much. We do have a webinar coming up September 30th. Look for an invite in your inbox within the next week. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.